The Marlow Murder Club by Robert Thorogood. 77-year-old Judith Potts lives a contented life alone in her sprawling, slightly crumbling arts and crafts mansion on the banks of the River Thames in Marlow. Her days are happily filled with compiling crosswords for national newspapers and enjoying a nightly glass of whisky. Each evening, she embraces a delicious ritual, removing her clothes, donning a treasured dark gray woolen cape which she believes grants invisibility, slipping on old wellies, and striding to her boathouse. There, hidden from view, she sheds the cape and wellies and slips into the cool embrace of the Thames for a naked swim, a secret delight she cherishes. One sweltering summer evening, during a prolonged heatwave, Judith is enjoying her swim, the setting sun glinting off the water. Suddenly, a shout rings out from the opposite bank, near the converted watermill home of her neighbour, Stefan Dunwoody. Straining to see over the tall bulrushes, she hears a man cry, "Hey, no!" followed immediately by the sharp crack of a gunshot. Panic rising, Judith calls out to Stefan, but receives only silence in return. Fearing he's been shot, she swims towards his property as fast as she can. However, reaching his riverbank presents a problem. Corrugated metal sheeting protects his lawn, making it impossible for her to land without injury or sufficient strength. She spots a blue canoe lodged in the reeds, but fails in her clumsy attempts to use it for leverage, capsizing it instead. Realizing she needs help and seeing no one else on the river or the Thames path, Judith swims frantically back to her own boathouse. Dripping and breathless, she throws on her cape, runs inside, grabs her phone, and dials 999, reporting a shooting at her neighbor's address. From her bay window, binoculars now in hand, she watches Stefan's house, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the emergency services. A uniformed police officer eventually arrives, conducts what Judith considers a cursory search of the grounds without entering the house, and then departs. Frustrated and worried, Judith keeps vigil, nursing her whisky, until midnight forces her to bed in her comfortably messy, tapestry-canopied four-poster. The next morning, Judith is woken by a call from Detective Sergeant Tanika Malik of the Maidenhead Police. D.S. Malik, an efficient woman in her early 40s with a teacherly air, informs Judith that the officer found nothing untoward at Mr. Dunwoody's property, and suggests the gunshot might have been a car backfiring. Judith, adamant about what she heard, points out that Stefan's car is still at his house, yet he hasn't answered his phone, implying something is wrong. D.S. Malik dismisses her concerns, assuring her Mr. Dunwoody will likely turn up and promises to inform Judith when he does. Unconvinced and unable to concentrate on her crossword puzzle, Judith uses her tablet to search for information about Stefan Dunwoody. She finds a recent local newspaper diary piece mentioning a drunken argument Stefan had at the Henley Royal Regatta 6 weeks prior with Elliot Howard, the owner of the Marlow auction house, which resulted in both men being ejected. This, coupled with Stefan's disappearance after a gunshot, strengthens Judith's conviction that foul play is involved. Determined, she launches her old punt from the boathouse and pulls herself across the river to Stefan's property. She inspects Stefan's gleaming gray car and finds no sign of other vehicles. Walking the garden, she tries to pinpoint the gunshot's origin, but struggles. She notes the old wooden water wheel, still turning lazily on the side of the house, feeding water into a dark mill pond. Following the outflow, she finds a narrow river crossed by a brick causeway leading to a wilder part of the garden. Pushing through overgrown bushes, she reaches a concrete weir where the water flows through iron bars back into the Thames. A fetid smell hangs in the air. Looking down at the grill, she sees what she initially mistakes for a submerged tree branch. With horror, she realizes it's a human arm, the hand marble white. Deeper in the murky water, she discerns the body of Stefan Dunwoody. A small, dark bullet hole is visible in the center of his forehead. Judith staggers back, vindicated, yet horrified. Her neighbor has indeed been murdered. An hour later, Judith is being interviewed again by D.S. Malik in Stefan's garden. Judith defiantly explains she returned because the initial police search was inadequate. D.S. Malik, however, cautions Judith against jumping to conclusions, suggesting Stefan's death could be an accident or suicide despite the bullet hole. Judith scoffs at the idea, pointing out the lack of a gun nearby. D.S. Malik mentions that 5 weeks earlier, just a week after the Henley incident, Stefan reported a break-in where a window was smashed, but strangely, nothing appeared to have been stolen, not his computer nor any of his valuable art collection. Judith hadn't heard about this from Stefan. The police divers are searching the river and pond for the gun, but D.S. Malik remains non-committal about murder. Realizing the police are unconvinced, Judith resolves to investigate herself. She cycles into the picturesque town of Marlow, a place she loves despite its recent economic struggles, scattering pigeons with mischievous glee. Her first stop is Dunwoody Arts, Stefan's gallery. Inside, she finds Stefan's young assistant, Antonia Webster, distraught. Judith introduces herself, recalling having helped Antonia once before, though she doesn't remember the specifics. Antonia, grateful and grieving, describes Stefan as a kind, older man. Judith gently probes, suggesting Stefan must have had some enemies or secrets if he was murdered. Antonia hesitates, then recounts a visit the previous Monday from a tall, grand gentleman with long silver hair. Stefan seemed embarrassed by the visitor and took him straight to his office, where raised voices were soon heard. When Antonia nervously offered coffee, the silver-haired man rudely dismissed her. As she closed the door, she heard Stefan tell the man, "I could go to the police right now." Later, Stefan apologized to Antonia for the scene, cryptically remarking, "Desperation drives people to do stupid things." Judith asks Antonia to search online for Elliot Howard. A picture confirms he is the silver-haired man who argued with Stefan. Judith immediately cycles to the Marlow auction house, a creaking, timber-framed building. Inside, she meets Daisy Howard, Elliot's friendly, 50-something wife with an Irish accent, who is working at the reception desk. Before Judith can concoct a reason for her visit, Elliot Howard himself appears. Tall, silver-haired, wearing casual cords and a cardigan, emanating an air of amused superiority. Flustered, Judith blurts out that he owes her money for spilling wine on her dress at Henley Regatta during his argument with Stefan. Elliot denies remembering the incident or Judith, but confirms the difference of opinion with Stefan, whom he labels a fraud and a liar, and a cheat and a crook. He dismisses Judith's claim about the dress as an invention. Accusing her of being a nosy neighbor playing amateur sleuth, he mentions casually that he knows Stefan is dead, having heard it was a tragic accident. When Judith presses him, stating she believes Stefan was murdered around 8:10 p.m. the previous night, Elliot confidently provides an alibi. He was at choir practice at All Saints Church from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., witnessed by the vicar and numerous others, including the mayor. He tells Judith to piss off before he calls the police, leaving her momentarily speechless. Undeterred, Judith cycles to All Saints Church, hoping to verify Elliot's alibi with the vicar, Colin Starling. Inside the peaceful church, she searches for choir information near the entrance, but finds none. Deciding to check the vestry, she pushes the door open. The room seems empty, filled with choir robes and a desk. But Judith feels an unsettling presence. Her sixth sense leads her to open a built-in cupboard, where she finds a woman hiding amidst the vicar's vestments. The woman, looking flustered but expensive in her quilted gilet and jeggings, introduces herself as Beck Starling, the vicar's wife. She explains she was tidying mugs and hid when she heard Judith approach. not wanting to encounter parishioners. Judith reassures her and shares her own tale of hiding under a desk at university. Bex confirms that Elliot Howard is a long-standing choir member and was indeed present at the rehearsal the previous night from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. However, she adds there's a short break around 8 p.m. when the boy trebles leave. She remembers seeing Elliot arrive at 7 p.m., but isn't certain she saw him after the break. Judith realizes this brief window might be enough time for Elliot to commit the murder. Bex reveals the church has a security camera in the gallery. Overcoming Bex's reluctance by subtly threatening police involvement and potential press intrusion, Judith persuades her to check the footage. They watch the recording on the vicar's computer. Elliot is clearly visible in the choir stalls from 7 p.m. He remains seated during the 8 p.m. break and stays until the rehearsal ends shortly after 9 p.m., seemingly providing a cast-iron alibi. However, just as Elliot leaves the choir stalls with friends, he glances directly at the camera lens for a fleeting moment with what Judith identifies as a look of triumph. Both women see it. While the footage clears Elliot physically, the look convinces Judith he's involved somehow, perhaps hiring a killer. Bex, spooked, refuses further involvement, insisting it's a matter for the police. Judith, however, now has a new, albeit reluctant, potential ally. The investigation takes a darker turn when D.S. Malik is called to a bungalow on the Wickham Road. A taxi driver, Iqbal Qassam, has been found dead in his bed, shot through the forehead, execution style. There are no signs of forced entry or struggle. Iqbal lived alone. His body was discovered by a delivery driver. On his bedside table are sleeping pills and a Quran. D.S. Malik learns from the dog walker, Susie Harris, a robust woman in her 50s with a direct manner, whom Malik finds spying from the garden, that Iqbal was a kind man saving up to buy a boat. Susie walks Iqbal's Doberman, Emma, daily, but didn't have a key to the house, only the garden gate. Iqbal, originally from Bradford, had returned to Marlow, the town where he spent some of his childhood. He apparently had no close family nearby. Susie mentions Iqbal took in Emma after his neighbour, Ezra Harrington, died of cancer the previous year, fulfilling a promise. D.S. Malik notes Iqbal's house contains books on sailing and a model ship. The pathologist confirms Iqbal died between 5 and 6 a.m., likely drugged by his prescription sleeping pills. The bullet is from the same antique German Luger pistol used to kill Stefan. Most chillingly, Tanika finds a small bronze medallion with the word hope carved on it, placed inside Iqbal's mouth. Recalling the faith medallion found on Stefan, Tanika realizes with horror that the killer is likely following the pattern: faith, hope, and charity, implying a third murder is yet to come. Judith learns about Iqbal's murder from the news, recognizing Susie Harris from the broadcast. Determined to investigate the connection, she meets Susie walking dogs along the Thames Taff. Susie confirms Iqbal was a thoroughly decent man who couldn't possibly be involved in anything illegal. She suggests Iqbal might have overheard something incriminating in his taxi. Judith tells Susie about Elliot Howard and her suspicions. Susie, knowing everyone in Marlow, describes Elliot merely as tall with nice hair, but offers no useful insight. She agrees to help Judith investigate. Later that day, Judith again encounters the mysterious auburn-haired woman from Stefan's garden, this time in a field near the church. The woman flees again, driving off rapidly in a maroon-colored car that backfires loudly. Judith recognizes the woman but frustratingly cannot place her. Meanwhile, D.S. Malik's team finds no link between Elliot Howard and Iqbal Qassam. Checks on Iqbal reveal he was hardworking, honest, and generous, saving diligently for his boat. Financial checks are clean. The only leads remain the matching Luger pistol and the medallions. Tanika questions Elliot again about antique pistols. He claims ignorance of any illegal trade. He recognizes the phrase, faith, hope, and charity, but attaches no special significance to it. He claims he was asleep in bed with his wife between 5 and 6 a.m. when Iqbal was killed, an alibi impossible to verify definitively. Tanika notes his lack of curiosity about why she's asking for his whereabouts. Judith and Bex reconnect after Bex sees responses to her anonymous online post about Elliot. While most comments are positive, one user, John Wayne's Horse, alleges that Elliot's father, Dudley, was a crook who ran scams with Stefan Dunwoody at the auction house years ago, claiming Elliot cleaned up the business when he took over. As they discuss this in Judith's dusty drawing room, they hear glass smash nearby. Looking out, they see a torchlight moving inside Stefan's house. Judith instructs Bex to call D.S. Malik while she punts across the river to confront the intruder. Inside Stefan's house, Judith bursts into the room where she saw the light. A figure in black, wearing a balaclava, shines a torch in her eyes, then throws the heavy torch at her head. Judith ducks, injuring her wrist as she falls. The intruder escapes. D.S. Malik arrives shortly after, followed by a panicked Bex. Judith explains what happened. Bex notices a mess of wood shavings, a hammer, and a chisel on a walnut writing desk near where the intruder was standing. She also points out that one painting on the wall, unlike all the others which are meticulously straight and framed, is slightly askew and, crucially, missing its frame. Judith realizes the intruder broke in specifically to remove the frame from that painting. An abstract piece with 3 bands of color: yellow, gray, red. Tanika removes the painting from the wall. On the back is a faded sticker, sold by Marlow Auction House, 15th December 1988. Judith connects this date to the information Bex found online about Elliot's father and Stefan being crooks. Tanika reveals the painting is identified by experts as a genuine, valuable Mark Rothko sketch. The puzzle deepens. Why steal a worthless frame from a valuable painting? Judith theorizes Elliot broke in to steal the frame, possibly because it contains something incriminating, or perhaps he intended to swap the real Rothko with a forgery he painted himself. Explaining the Rothko-style paintings, Tanika later finds him burning, but was interrupted. The lack of frame on the real Rothko suggests he panicked and put the original back up, fleeing without the frame. Judith, Bex, and Susie meet again. They track down the postman, Fred Smith, who worked at the auction house under both Elliot and his father, Dudley. Fred confirms Dudley was crooked and often worked scams with Stefan, who was their art expert. Stefan's trick was undervaluing art brought in by unsuspecting sellers, allowing Dudley to buy it cheaply, only for it to reappear later, correctly attributed and valued. Fred corroborates the story of the Rothko. Stefan undervalued the painting, part of Dudley's estate inherited by Elliot, bought it cheaply himself, then revealed its true value, cheating Elliot out of a fortune in 1988. This betrayal happened shortly before Elliot left the auction house to attend art school, leaving Fred in charge. Elliot later returned when the business struggled under Fred's management. Fred confirms Elliot is fundamentally honest, unlike his father and Stefan. This reinforces Elliot's motive for hating Stefan, but doesn't explain how he bypassed his alibi. The women attend Iqbal's sparsely attended funeral. Afterwards, Imam Latif tells them Iqbal was angry because he believed he'd been cheated out of an inheritance from his neighbor, Ezra Harrington. Ezra had initially promised Iqbal his house and money for his kindness during his illness. However, someone else persuaded Ezra to change his will at the last minute. The Imam recalls Iqbal pointing out a very short, very fat man in a suit carrying a briefcase in a car park, identifying him as the man who stole his inheritance. Judith realizes Ezra's will must have cleared probate if his house is for sale. She explains they can order a copy online. The will arrives, revealing the sole beneficiary and executor was Ezra's solicitor, Andy Bishop. Judith confronts Andy Bishop in his office. He matches the imam's description: short, fat, wearing a waistcoat straining at the buttons. Judith pretends to seek advice about her own, fictional, great-aunt leaving money to her solicitor. Andy dismisses her concerns, condescendingly suggesting she's a bored busybody. As Judith leaves, insulted, she barges back in and sees Andy hastily shredding a glossy piece of paper. This confirms his guilt in her mind. The three friends regroup at the vicarage. They devise a plan to retrieve the shredded paper. Susie and Judith will create a diversion outside Andy's office window using a charity shop wheelchair, while Bex enters the front, finds the kitchenette, and jams the toaster to set off the fire alarm, forcing an evacuation to the back car park where Susie can climb in the window. The plan nearly fails multiple times. Susie struggles to climb. The evacuation happens sooner than expected. Andy almost spots Judith. Bex has an awkward encounter with a flirty Andy in the kitchenette, and Susie is nearly caught hiding in the office. Bex manages to lure Andy out for a walk, just in time for Susie to grab the shredded paper, replacing it with pre-shredded paper from Bex's hamster cage, and escape. During their walk, Andy reveals incriminating details to Bex. He knows Stefan was shot with an antique pistol. Information not public. Hints he could arrange for Colin to be out of the way, and boasts about his athletic youth. Back at Judith's, she painstakingly reassembles the shredded paper. It's page 74 from the Borlasian School magazine, listing recent obituaries. Crucially, it shows the two witnesses to Ezra's will, Spencer Chapman and Faye Kerr. Both died in March of the previous year, a month before they supposedly witnessed the will, dated May 5th. Andy Bishop forged the will. Judith theorizes Iqbal, also an old Borlasian, received the magazine, discovered the fraud, and confronted Andy, giving Andy a motive for murder. Judith calls Tanika, explaining the forged will and urging Andy's arrest. Tanika reveals Andy Bishop has an unbreakable alibi. He was on holiday in Malta during the first two murders. Frustrated, Judith feels the killer is playing games with the Luger, implicating Elliot, and the Masonic medallions, implicating Andy, who Tanika confirms is a Mason, unlike the others. The only common link remains rowing. Elliot and Danny rowed at Borlase's. Liz was an Olympic rower. Stefan hated rowing. Iqbal had no connection. Judith revisits Elliot's office, noticing a rowing team photo is now missing from the wall. His wife Daisy confronts her fiercely, confirming Judith's suspicion that rowing is the key. Judith realizes the answer lies in her newspaper archive. After Susie confronts her about her past using an old article about her husband, Philippos's accidental death in Greece, Judith finally connects the dots. She remembers Andy Bishop boasting to Bex about his athletic youth despite his current physique. She recalls Fred the Postie mentioning Elliot rowed at school. She knows Liz was an Olympic rower and her husband, Danny, coached the youth GB team. Danny, Elliot, and Andy were all old Borlasians. A coxswain needs to be small and light. Andy fit the description in his youth. The missing photo from Elliot's study must have shown the three of them together as a successful school rowing team, a coxed pair. The motive wasn't individual, it was a pact. Danny wanted Liz dead for the land value. Elliot wanted Stefan dead for the Rothko theft and betrayal. Andy wanted Iqbal dead to cover up the will forgery. They agreed to commit the murders for each other, using the same gun and leaving medallions to suggest a single killer and imply the spree was over after 3 victims. Elliot killed Iqbal for Andy while Andy was in Malta. Andy killed Liz for Danny while Danny was provably in Nottingham. That left Danny to kill Stefan for Elliot. Elliot calls Judith, threateningly warning her off. Judith confirms Andy is also out of town. Knowing she's the loose end and the next target, she realizes Danny will come for her that night. While the others have alibis, she arranges for Susie to watch the river and alert Bex, waiting near the police station when the killer arrives by canoe. During a violent storm, Danny arrives much faster than anticipated. Judith confronts him, laying out the entire three-way murder plot. Danny shoots, but misses. Judith throws her empty sweet tin, distracting him long enough to stab his arm with a pencil. He disarms her and is about to shoot again when Emma the Doberman bursts in, having been sent by Susie, who tried and failed to swim the river but was saved by Emma. Emma attacks Danny. Bex arrives with police, having overcome a fallen tree blocking the road thanks to the collective effort of the choir and townspeople summoned by the church bell. Danny is arrested. Tenica arranges for Elliot and Andy to be apprehended. The case is closed. Judith, Susie, and Bex celebrate with champagne on the punt, where Judith implicitly confirms Susie's suspicions about her own husband's demise years ago. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.